I want to say, first of all, welcome. Good morning to President Sue Henderson, Provost Tamara Joshi, Acting Secretary of Higher Education, Dr. Bridges, Dr. Brian Bridges, honored guests, members of the Basso community, and the wider community. Welcome to the 32nd Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration at New Jersey City University. I'm Sonia Donaldson, Associate Professor of English Literature, Coordinator of the African and African American Studies Program, and Director of the Lee Hagen Africana Studies Center. I am proud to welcome you to this year's event with the theme, The Soul of America, Fighting for Liberation and Everyday Justice. We're honored to welcome Dr. Brian Bridges, Acting Secretary of Higher Education for the state of New Jersey, as our keynote speaker. Dr. Bridges will deliver remarks, after which we will open the conversation to you all. And I'm actually quite thrilled to have this opportunity to be in conversation with Dr. Bridges and for the community to be in conversation with him in his new role. So welcome, Dr. Bridges, to New Jersey and to NJCU. You may submit questions to Dr. Bridges via the Q&A feature in Zoom. In the interim, please feel free to introduce yourself through the chat feature. I'd love to see where folks are logging in from and joining us for this event. So I want to begin with a small announcement about a couple of shifts to the program. So as you know, each year, in addition to celebrating Dr. King's life and legacy, we also honor 2 students with scholarships in recognition of their academic achievements. And we honor 1 person with a Community Service Award. This year, due to the pandemic, winners will be announced on February 5th when the Hagen Center and Basso will open Black History Month with online events and a Black History Month keynote lecture by historian Dr. Daryl Scott of Howard University. This past year has shaken us in many ways. And as the pandemic continues with just a glimmer of hope on the horizon, we mourn our losses of friends, loved ones, colleagues, and others. Today, the NJCU community mourns as well with the recent loss of Sheila Curvin, librarian, scholar, warrior, sister, and friend. She was an advocate of getting into good trouble, as Congressman John Lewis would say. I've asked Dominique Smith, Director of the Ascend Program and Vice President of the Black Alumni Administrator, Faculty, Student, and Staff Organization, affectionately known as BAFSO, to share a few words of memory and comfort with us at the top of this program. Dominique?
Good morning, everyone. So during his time, King left us with many thought-provoking and heart-stirring principles, one of which resonates in this season in more ways than one. King expressed that there is nothing more tragic than to find an individual bogged down in the length of life devoid of breath. He's not referring to the breath in our lungs, but that which we strive to glean and give while we possess that breath in our lungs. That breath could be considered as many things, such as the knowledge, which is the complete opposite of ignorance, the experience, the ability to serve, to live with purpose, soul, true depth. And one thing this past year has poignantly reminded us is that time is like the coming and going of the crashing waves on the shoreline. We don't know who and we don't know when it will take, or even so what it might bring. But while we stand here, as the time ebbs and flows, we must know that it is our charge and our privilege to use our gifts and our platforms and our lives to help and to love others along our journey. Just as expressed in the hymn that was sung to honor Sheila the day we learned of her transition. If I can help somebody as I travel along, if I can help somebody with a word or a song, if I can help somebody from doing wrong, no, my living shall not be in vain. And Sheila's life was not in vain. She had breath and plenty of it, and she was willing to share it with each of us daily. She was a proud mother, an educator, an activist, a servant leader. In fact, she was awarded with the Community Service Award in 2019. Sheila was present, she was consistent, she was kind, and she is loved. As BAFSO began to celebrate her legacy last week, many beautiful memories of daily conversations and interactions were shared. And even having not known Sheila as long and as profoundly as many in this space, I felt the weight of her loss and the joy of her memory. I personally recall a time where she lovingly clarified that she overheard a campus tour and that our ambassadors needed an accurate refresher on the library and its services, and then promptly followed up with an email full of clarifying points for them to share on their tours. So during our celebration, it was also expressed that we lost a pillar, while her transition has left a deep void. Let us with time try to shift our perspective and do as she would have wanted. And I'm gleaning this from all that has been expressed by her loved ones. Let's do what she would want and allow her now to shift from being a pillar that one can lean on to being part of the ancestral foundation, the ground and the shoulders that we will continue now to stand on as we continue the great work that lies ahead. Sheila has passed the baton, and we will continue to fight for the soul of America, starting with our own community, and we will continue to seek liberation and everyday justice, and we will do so with love in our hearts as we continue to take strides towards equal access and representation, the honoring of human rights, and what Sheila valued so deeply, the provision of knowledge and tremendous love and support. Bless her soul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominique. I really appreciate this moving tribute to Sheila, and there will be more, of course, to come. And now I'd like to introduce Carissa Simon, class of 2021, who will sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as the Black National Anthem. So I met Carissa in her first semester at NJCU when she landed in my literature class, having recently arrived from St. Croix, the US Virgin Islands, as part of the National Student Exchange Program. She was filled with energy, curiosity, and a desire to learn everything. Carissa decided to remain at NJCU, and I'm so glad she did. She's a graduating senior, earning her degree in early childhood education. She hopes to go on to earn a master's as well. Please join me in welcoming Carissa Simon, singing Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Good morning, everyone. I do apologize. I'm a dorm student. There's a knock on my door. Please excuse me one brief minute. I do apologize. I do apologize.
Life in the dorm. This is wonderful. This is actually what I love about this moment, as trying as it may be in terms of distance and separation. This is real life as well, right? Thank you, Carissa.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us. facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Beautiful, Carissa. Thank you so much. And congratulations on all your accomplishments at NJCU. I'm so happy and proud of you and glad you decided to stay here with us. In appreciation of you and in the interest of time, I will keep my remarks brief. This year's theme is the soul of America, fighting for liberation and everyday justice. It draws on a 1960 speech by Dr. King, The Negro and the American Dream, and uses a consistent trope in his speeches, the dream, or specifically the American dream. In this past election cycle, we saw Dr. King's words in the speech get taken up, become decontextualized and deployed, sometimes in ways to advance progressive politics, as in Dr. King's idea of African Americans being instrumental in saving the soul of America. Sometimes his words were deployed in disturbing ways by those advancing white supremacist and white nationalist arguments about the nation. On January 6th, we witnessed on our multiple screens hordes of angry rioters descended on the nation's capital in an attempted coup, a usurpation of the democratic process of free and fair elections. Some were shocked, but for many African Americans who for generations have experienced racial violence and terror, it was simply Wednesday in America. So I want to take up that passage in King's speech and what comes just before this idea of saving America. And he said, quote, "So many forces in our nation have served to scar the dream of our democracy. The Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizens Council, and other extremist groups have scarred the dream by their fanatical acts and bitter words. But our federal government has also scarred the dream through its apathy and hypocrisy, its betrayal of the cause of justice. And even many white people of goodwill have scarred the dream through silence and fear. In the midst of this conspiracy of silence and apathy, the Negro must act. It may well be that the Negro is God's instrument to save the soul of America," end quote. Now, while King's words were not necessarily a direct injunction for African Americans to yet again save America from itself, they do point to a tendency to instrumentalize Black labor and Black life, Black culture, Black art, Black intellect in the service of a larger national politics. Often, it is in the moments of national crisis, as now, when the soul of America is at stake, that we see again attention paid to Black people and to Black life. This morning, we awoke to the news that the outgoing president's 1776 commission had issued a document, one that was filled with untruths, half-truths, and plagiarized passages, the very antithesis of serious intellectual work, attacking the principles for which Dr. King fought and which we hold dear: truth, justice, democracy, and the liberal arts foundation on which our educational institution is built. The obscenity of that act, releasing the document on the observation of Dr. King's birthday, is lost on no one. It must serve as an impetus for us to redouble our efforts to ensure that our educational foundations are strong, that we hold our leaders and ourselves accountable, and that we do the work together to ensure our own liberation. And now I'm pleased to introduce the president of New Jersey City University, Dr. Sue Henderson.
Thank you, Sonia, and thanks all of you who have spoken and sung before. The music was beautiful. Good morning. It's my honor to speak to you today as part of NJCU's 32nd Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration. Yesterday, we paused as a nation to remember the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. While it's been 52 years since Dr. King's passing, each year we are more grateful for his courageous work. As we stand on the shoulders of giants in the civil rights movement, most notably Dr. King, last year we faced a national reckoning on social injustice and systemic racism. Indeed, 2020 was one of the most challenging years in our lifetime. But within the grasp of the pandemic, the events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd brought to life the racial awakening in our country that has been there for a long time. Whether a nation already affected by the pandemic, the tumultuous events of the spring, including the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the protests throughout our country as a result, have once again reminding us of the racism that persists in America today. And while we've made continual progress on equality since the March in Washington in 1963, clearly there's much work to be done. With all the challenges we face today, it's easy to fall victim to despair. However, I'm encouraged by Dr. King's words. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Yes, we have to keep moving forward as a nation and as a free people to ensure equality for everyone, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their gender identity, their sexual orientation, religion, or any other status. It is never easy and it is never a straight line. Our country has changed considerably over the last half century and it will continue to change. This summer at NJCU, we institute an executive president's diversity team charged with the effective hiring a diversity inclusion officer who will report directly to the president. It will bring to the forefront important issues like hiring, employment development, and inclusion. While we've accomplished a lot, we have and must continue to set high goals. This is just one way our institution will continue to come together as a community. We have a civic responsibility as a nation to keep up the good work of Dr. King and other leaders. Tomorrow is Inauguration Day. Every 4 to 8 years, our nation, one of the oldest democracies in the history of the world, performs a special, peaceful transition of power. It is a moment where the world is watching. It reinforces that the power is in the people of our republic and a reminder that even when we disagree, we are a united America. But 2 weeks ago, that fabric of our democracy was strained as our nation endured one of its darkest days in recent American history. A mob of rioters swarmed the United States Capitol. In the wake of those disturbing and unpatriotic events, I was troubled, as I am sure all of you, and experienced many emotions, including shock, sadness, and anger. But today, we celebrate the life of Dr. King. I have another emotion, and that is hope. Hope that we will be better as a nation, as a free people who will continue to come together to help one another, to right injustices, and to continue the important work of Dr. King. I echo the word of Dr. King, who said, "The time is always right to do what is right." Well, today we hold our 32nd annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration in a virtual format. For the first time, our theme is the soul of America, fighting for liberation and everyday justice. Given all that we have endured in 2020 and the issues we have been elevated to the front of our discourse, this is a conversation that must continue today and every day. Before we continue with our program, I would like to acknowledge and welcome all of our special guests who are here today from our university, our public schools, the city, and our state. Your participation in this event is so important, and we thank you. I want to thank Sonia Donaldson and Maria Lynn and everyone who worked on today's program for their work in continuing this program uninterrupted during what has been the most unique year ever in higher education. And I especially want to welcome Dr. Brian Bridges. He's our Acting Secretary of Higher Education here in New Jersey, for being here today as our keynote speaker and for the important work that you are doing to share throughout the program. The work that you are doing to support our institutions, just like NJCU, especially amid this COVID-19 pandemic, is vitally important. The work you've done in equity and education throughout your career is inspiring. Finally, I want to close by paying tribute to New Jersey civil rights leader, Carolyn Oliver Fair, who passed away on January 5th after a long illness. She was the executive director of the North Jersey chapter of the National Action Network. Throughout her life, she was a mentor and an inspiration to many, and our community is better because of her devotion to fighting for what she felt was right. She will be missed. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Good morning, everyone. My name is Benita Rodman Jenkins. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And hello, I direct the Spiker Rubin Women's Center for Equity and Diversity. In addition, I coordinate NJCU's Gothic Night Allies Safe Zone program, and I am the president of BAFSO. Thank you, Dr. Donaldson, for organizing this event. Thank you, Dr. Bridges, for being here as our special guest. And I'm so happy, Dr. Donaldson, that you chose to honor our dear friend, our dear colleague, our dear sister, Sheila Curvin. Very befitting as we honor Dr. King today to connect that with Sheila's life. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our student speaker, Tyquel M. Halley. I had the pleasure of meeting Tyquel virtually. I really don't think we've actually met in person through various trainings and programs and events throughout this past year. Tyquel is in the class of 2023 here at New Jersey City University and is the student representative on the NJCU Board of Trustees. He is also Vice President of Finance and Administration for the Student Activities Board at NJCU. A Jersey City native, Tyquel is a political science major with the minor in pre-law. His goal is to inspire, change, and lead his peers and help move NJCU forward. Welcome with me, Tyquel M. Halley.
Thank you, Venita, for that warming introduction. Good morning, Dr. Bridges, President Henderson, Dr. Donaldson, and everyone who is here and a part of the NJCU community. Once again, my name is Tyquel Halley. I'm the student representative for the Board of Trustees, amongst many other titles throughout campus. We are gathered here today for a few reasons. The first reason we're gathered here today, virtually of course, is to honor and celebrate the life and legacy of none other than Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I remember a song growing up in elementary school that went, Dr. King, Dr. King. Dr. King was a civil rights leader. Dr. King, Dr. King. He had a dream. He wanted everybody to love one another. He wanted everybody to love one another. He wanted everybody to love one another. That was his dream. That was his dream. And we are here to celebrate and honor a leader, an activist, an advocate, a great speech giver, a father, a preacher, a friend, all these other great attributes we can list about who Dr. King was. But Dr. King was also a listener and a learner to those who around him who could give him knowledge and insight and help him expand his thinking and understanding. I believe the second reason that we're gathered here today is to remember and think about what Dr. King was trying to tell us throughout his various speeches. And though he gave many speeches decades ago, back in the 1960s and whatnot, his message still rang clear to reach our ears today in 2021. One thing he was trying to tell us is that he had a dream. Of course, we all know that Dr. King had a dream. I think everyone in the world knows that he had a dream. But Dr. King had a dream. He had a vision, an imagination. He had a sight, a view of something that could be possible, a dream. He had a vision for where America was going, for where it was going, for where we could all be years and years to come. He had a dream. I remember in his dream, in his speech, he talked about imagining a world where his children can grow up and walk hand in hand with somebody from the opposite race, who could sit at the same dining tower and table in a restaurant with someone of the opposite race or a different race. He had a dream. Another thing that Dr. King was trying to tell us is that he knew he may not live long enough to see his dream come to life. In his last speech he had given, he says, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter to me now because I've gone to the mountaintop and I don't mind like anybody. I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned with that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the mountaintop and I looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm so happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Those were Dr. King's last words in his speech. What's so profound to me is that he said he has gone to the mountaintop and he's seen the promised land. That right there tells you that no matter what we may think, say, try to do, or don't try to do, there is a land that is promised, and we as a people will get there. A promised land where there's equality, where there's justice, where there's peace. A promised land that isn't just hope, but we can live in hope every single day. And another thing he said at the very last line, he said, "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." And all I can think about is, what glory did Dr. King see? He also was trying to tell us that he was leaving us with the responsibility to keep working no matter what. Dr. Henderson just quoted one of these quotes from Dr. King that says, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." I want you to notice how he says you have to keep moving. To keep means to continue. You have to keep moving forward. You see, we've already accomplished so much. We've overcome slavery. We've overcome segregation. We've overcome so many obstacles and things. We've come so far and have been successful so far, but we have got to keep moving because we aren't done yet. The race isn't finished. The course isn't over yet. We have to take what we have such a rich history, such a rich understanding and knowledge of what happened in the past. We have to take hold of that and carry it into the future as we continue the work and continue fighting each and every day. Don't let obstacles, the media, politics, or even yourself get in the way of that. I believe another reason we're gathered here today is to understand the work that we are still obligated to do to build an America that is equal for all, period. The soul of America depends on what we do right here on this campus starting today. It sounds pretty dramatic. It seems too big to think about or too big to handle, but we, NJCU family and community, we need to save the soul of America. You might be asking yourself, well, how am I supposed to save the soul of America? I'm just one person. I'm just to this, I'm just to that. How am I supposed to save the soul of America? Well, I'll tell you this, it is my job as a student, and all students, it is our job, the first thing to learn, to be educated, to go in the classrooms and get all the understanding and knowledge that we can gain and absorb as possible. But it's not just about being educated. It's about what we do with the education that we receive. Many classes, we engage in meaningful debates. We research different things that are interesting or weird or different to us. We learn about things that might just tick us off and get us real upset and riled up. Everything that we get inside the classroom, all those emotions, those energies, we have to take that and transform it into action in the real world. When we're learning about things, when we're seeing things that were interesting, we have to act on those things. It's our job as students to act on our education. It's the job of professors and staff and faculty members to challenge students, to teach students, and to charge students, to push us beyond our limits and our comfort zones. Give us something new that's beyond the textbook, beyond the course syllabus. Give us something that will really intrigue us and that will push us to go out there in a real world and really work towards something. It is also the role of administration to hold staff and faculty and students accountable to do their part inside and outside of the classroom, while also dedicating additional resources and funding to make sure that we can be inspired to go out there and change the world. I believe the fourth reason that we're gathered here today is to remind ourselves of this one thing. We need to stop taking the back seat and get up and do something to make a difference. I want you to ask yourself today, take 2-3 minutes to sit down and just make a list of things that you're actually doing each day to make a difference. What are you really doing to make a difference? Yeah, of course, you show up and you go to your meetings and you write your reports and you send out your emails and you do this and you do that. But what are you really doing to make a difference? What are you doing to make a difference? I'm not just talking about, oh, we're going to read a new book in class. So we're going to paint these walls differently. I'm going to go and join this club as a student. No, that's all cool and great. But what are you really doing to make a difference? We cannot truly honor and celebrate Dr. King if we don't talk about what we're doing on a day-to-day to make a difference. Let me tell you something, there's a promised land out there for us. Everything that's wrong, everything that's imperfect, all the problems that we're facing today, from Capitol riots to Black Lives Matter protests and social injustices, all those things can be overcome, can be fixed, can be rewritten if we get up and act and make a difference. There is an America out there for each of us, a beautiful, bright America, the one they sing about in a national anthem and in the oh beautiful, oh great America, the one they sing about that we just don't see. We can see it because it's promised to us, but we as a people have to get up, get to work, and get there. So I challenge each and every one of you today, work towards your promised land and continue the dream that Dr. King left for us. Thank you. God bless you. And always happy birthday, MLK. And we thank you for all that you did.
Thank you, Thyquil, for that wonderful and rousing call to action for us all. I'm really happy that this year to have the very present voices of students in our program. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Brian Bridges. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Bridges, Acting Secretary of Higher Education for the state of New Jersey, a role he began on November 16th, 2020, as part of Governor Phil Murphy's administration. As Acting Secretary, Dr. Bridges is responsible for policy development and coordination of higher education activities for the state, including supporting institutions amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. He also coordinates initiatives to improve college affordability in New Jersey through the State Plan for Higher Education and enhance post-secondary opportunities while promoting equity and access for all through programs such as the state's Community College Opportunity Grant. Dr. Bridges previously served as Vice President of Research and Member Engagement at the United Negro College Fund in Washington, D.C., where he led UNCF's Frederick D. Patterson Research Institute and the Institute for Capacity Building. He served as the organization's Chief Research Officer, Principal Editor, and contributor of FDPRI's publications, as well as the manager of internal and external projects involving capacity building, evaluation, and assessment. Dr. Bridges also led the UNCF Career Pathways Initiative, a project funded by the Lilly Endowment to improve job placement outcomes at historically Black colleges and universities and predominantly Black institutions. And I'm not going to go on because it's a sort of long list of Dr. Bridges' work and accomplishments. He earned his doctorate in higher education administration from Indiana University, Bloomington, a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and a Bachelor of Arts in English Language and Literature from Francis Marion University. Dr. Bridges was born in Brooklyn, New York, and reared in Beaufort, South Carolina. So yay for English Lit and Brooklyn, which I went to Brooklyn College. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Brian Bridges.
Well, thank you, Dr. Donaldson. I appreciate the warm words. I always tell people you don't have to give much of an intro from me, but thank you nonetheless. And I want to thank everyone for having me here today. Now, I must say, you know, there's an old axiom that you don't follow babies. And I want to add to that Thyquil Halley because he gave a rousing opening speech. And so now I have to try to live up to that, but I'll try my best nonetheless. So I want to thank President Henderson and the New Jersey City University community for bestowing upon me the honor of being your keynote speaker today. I am truly humbled. I also want to acknowledge and thank you for allowing me to be part of the tribute to Sheila Curvin. Although I did not know her, I can tell that she was one of those stalwarts that every campus has that serves as the foundation for the campus community and particularly the Black community on campus. So I appreciate being able to partake and participate in that, that acknowledgement. I've coordinated MLK Day celebrations at a few campuses, never via Zoom, so that's a different wrinkle here. But I understand how important this day is in reinforcing institutional values of justice, equality, cooperation, and service, all values that are sorely in need during these trying times. Now, I think we've shared with you that I've been given more time. I'm not going to take all of my time. I won't talk at you the whole time, but we'll talk for about 8 to 10 minutes or so. And then we want to engage in discussion, ask a couple of questions that people can put into the chat box that we will pose to the group as well, that we can get a dialogue going. So I want to begin with a little bit about me. I am a child of the Great Migration North, where Black people of previous generations moved out of the South to escape oppressive racial climates and seek more economic opportunities. Hence, why I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I am the product, however, of a loving grandmother who was born in 1911 and who reared me from 4 years old in South Carolina, in Beaufort, South Carolina. My grandmother only achieved a 6th grade education, but she understood the importance of education as a pathway to a better life. She not only encouraged me to pursue as much education as possible, but she also inspired me to give back once my life was transformed by the education that I would pursue. She essentially issued a call to action to me to become a role model for those less fortunate in my community. Essentially a call to reach one and teach one over and over and over, time and time again. So I am myself a testament to the emancipating, transformative power of a post-secondary education. And I've dedicated my career to assuring that equal access to such education and the necessary support to succeed is afforded to everyone. As we celebrate Dr. King's legacy, I cannot help but reflect on his numerous calls to action that resonate so profoundly decades later, especially given the societal unrest we are experiencing more than 50 years after his assassination. I find the theme of today's celebration particularly fitting, the soul of America, fighting for liberation and everyday justice, because today, in the year 2021, as we navigate a public health crisis unlike any other in the last century, our fight for justice and equality continues. And I recognize that we as a nation did not get here overnight. The deadly US Capitol attack 2 weeks ago, spurred on by years of intense political rhetoric that amplifies what divides us, has further eroded the fundamental principles of dignity and respect that our nation was founded on and that Dr. King so eloquently promoted. On the other side of the coin, there are voices that have too often been marginalized in the past, voices that have emerged with compelling intensity to affirm that Black Lives Matter and hold our police accountable for their too often brutal and senseless actions. These opposing conflicts have demonstrated that we need to choose an intentional equity lens through which we view our world and go about our daily interactions as we stand for what is truly right and just. I believe our nation has reached a tipping point. The systemic racism deeply rooted and embedded in our history is far from gone. When you watch the news, when you experience injustice firsthand, as many of us have, and when you consider the death toll of Black Americans lost to repeated acts of racism and senseless violence, it can be defeating to believe that little has changed. But I am inspired by today's students like yourselves, like Thyquel, for instance, like Carissa, who are using your voices, exercising your rights, and shouting loud and proud for what you believe in. A society that couples equity and inclusion with dignity and respect for human life. In this moment, all of us, especially our students, should feel empowered to play an active role and be advocates for change to heal our society, especially for the sake of future generations. In 1960, at the annual Freedom Mass meeting of the North Carolina State Conference of Branches of the NAACP, Dr. King said in an address titled, "The Negro and the American Dream," he said, "Never before in the United States has so large a body of students spread a struggle over so great an area in pursuit of a goal of human dignity and freedom. I am convinced that future historians will have to record this student movement as one of the greatest epics of our heritage." Yet here we are still, 61 years after Dr. King made that statement, amid a global pandemic, standing together, marching in the streets, because it's clear still to this day that institutional racism still stings, and the brutality and oppression often associated with it are real. I've been thinking about my own experience a lot lately. Yes, I have graduated from 3 different universities and I hold a doctoral degree. Yes, I have worked at 5 different college campuses and throughout my professional career have helped to advance equity and the mission of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and predominantly Black institutions. And yes, I'm New Jersey's acting Secretary of Higher Education. But generation after generation of Black people have learned that racism can literally kill you, even if you think you did everything right. The images from earlier this month were chilling to my core. Throughout the country's history, mob violence has far too often been directed at Black men, often resulting in dehumanization and the loss of life. Despite what I have achieved, I am not convinced that I am exempt from becoming a victim of mob violence or police brutality simply because I was born with more melanin in my skin than those who have often been the purveyors of such violence. And I know I am not alone in feeling this way. So where do we go from here? How do we right the wrongs of our past? I recognize that words are only words unless there is action to back them up. And we in the Murphy administration, we here in New Jersey are allies in the broader fight for justice. In New Jersey, we have a governor who not only supports our mission to ensure equitable access to post-secondary education, but who also believes in affirming our diverse community as a societal strength. You have a coalition of higher education leaders in my office who understand that while our campuses rank among the most diverse in the country, the level of respect that we show our students must be applied to society at large. That's why in our state plan for higher education, we do not shy away from explicitly calling out issues of equity. It's why we commit to making New Jersey's campuses not only more diverse, but truly inclusive, safe, and welcoming places for all students. To be revered as an innovation educational leader, New Jersey must nurture learning environments where all students, regardless of race, ethnic origin, sex, gender and gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and ability, just to name a few, have the chance to be successful in college and feel prepared for future success. I don't want a single person who aspires to succeed and achieve greatness to feel hopeless, to feel like earning a college degree is not a reality within their reach. As we begin a new year, we face a pivotal key moment in our nation's history as a new president is inaugurated tomorrow. The Biden-Harris administration has committed to healing the soul of America, turning from tragedy to purpose, rebuilding our bonds, and beginning to heal. Part of that will challenge us to embrace our differences and come to an understanding that our disagreements can make us stronger. Tomorrow, the inauguration tomorrow is the result of democracy at work. And I hope students across the country from all walks of life are paying attention and understanding the role they play in building our future. I pray that we are destined for a turning point in our nation's history where we revolutionize our thinking of not only about the value of Black lives and engage New Jersey's brightest students in this new era of civic engagement, but that we understand that tomorrow is shaped by those who exist in it today. It's okay if you feel outraged right now. I understand. It's okay if you feel depressed right now. And it's okay if you feel powerless. I hope you're feeling none of those things, but together, because together, let's help point the nation's moral compass in the right direction, because the stain of racism is real. Be it explicit acts of racism, covert racism, microaggressions, whatever the case might be, know that we can overcome and bring about positive change working collectively. No one should die simply because they are Black or because of a whole host of other personal characteristics for that matter. Let's make sure that those Black lives and others who have supported equality were not lost in vain, and ensure that more lives are not lost to this pattern of racism. And Thyquil mentioned what Dr. King would want us to focus on. He mentioned the work that needs to be done. And Dr. King would believe that there is significant work for us to continue to do to transform our society over 50 years since he left this earth. So let us commence. Let us commence with the work to strengthen our communal bonds as we work toward building the beloved community that Dr. King so often spoke about. Let us commence with the work to hold our public servants and institutions accountable to the values of our founding documents that all men are created equal. Let us commence with the work to instill justice and equity in all walks of not only our personal lives, but throughout the fabric of our society. Dr. King would expect no less, and he would hold us all accountable, as Thyquil said, to get up and get to work. Again, I want to thank New Jersey City University for bringing these important issues to light and offering this space for us to connect, albeit virtually. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of today's celebration. And now I welcome the opportunity for us to engage in a dialogue around today's theme.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. Definitely words for us to be motivated by. I know I split things and it's a preposition at the end of a sentence and it's English lit people. But these are inspirational words, but also words to get us to be about the work itself. And so for our Q&A, Dr. Bridges has provided us with some opening questions, sort of questions for us to think about. The first one being, how have Dr. King's teachings resonated with you today, given all that has transpired since his activism? So we can start with that. Or we might want to think about the philosophical battles taking place in today's society and the ways in which Dr. King might encourage a renewed engagement to stimulate greater liberation and justice. We might also want to think about this moment, right, characterized by divisive rhetoric in our politics, and rhetoric which led to the assault on the Capitol earlier this month. How would King have responded, do you think, to this moment, which is a signal moment in American history in so many ways? And then how do you plan to take today's conversation a step further to enact meaningful change, whether it's in your own lives, whether it's in the NJCU community or sort of the broader community? So there's some sort of general questions to throw about. So perhaps we can think about the sort of resonance of today, of Dr. King's teaching in our current moment. And
well, Dr. Donaldson, there is a question in the Q&A where the person asking, share your thoughts in context of the economic and pandemic, how our leaders can support the student support agenda for our students of color.
Okay.
But one of the things, let me just jump in on that one. I do believe that we've heard the data over and over again. We know the information. I was an English lit major, but I've become also a data geek, and understand that the pandemic has disproportionately affected the lives of Black and brown people in the loss of life, in the economic disruption that has resulted from it. And so our communities have been ravaged. The communities of the students who attend New Jersey City University have been ravaged. And how does your institution support students of color, particularly, to navigate this pandemic and the disruption that it's caused? And I've had some experience with this in my previous role working with HBCUs, because we talked about this quite a bit before coming into this new role. I do think that as campus faculty and staff, your students need your support now more than ever. I think something as simple as simply, as I've said to folks, provide students with some grace. Help them to understand that we're all dealing with something that, unless you're around 115 years old, you would not have experienced the last major global pandemic. And so I think we all need to deal with it, give each other a little bit of grace in how we navigate our society in this time and age. Also, whatever the institution can do to provide additional supports to students, be it counseling support, mental health support, be it whatever financial support, academic support. I think that the wraparound services that institutions like NJCU typically give to their students are needed even more than ever before. And I know that your institution provides those supports. And how do we help encourage students not to be too proud to take advantage of the supports that your university provides to them? And so I think outreach to students to help pull them in even more intentionally than you've ever done in the past is necessary, and to help students understand that the university is there for them. As I've said in my previous role, that an institution like NJCU knows that for many of your students, you are the safest, most secure, most stable environment that many of those students have. Not all of them, but you are a shelter in a time of storm for these students. And so I encourage you as faculty and staff and administrators at your institution to continue to be that shelter for your students in this time of need.
Thank you, Dr. Bridges. Again, be sure that you're posting your questions in the Q&A. I think if we're thinking along the lines of John's question about sort of supporting students during the pandemic, I'm wondering, sort of coming into the space, coming into New Jersey higher ed during a pandemic, what do you see as some of the sort of major challenges for higher education institutions right now and going forward?
Great question. Well, there's always the one big challenge that always exists, as I'm sure Dr. Henderson would agree, is that there's not enough money. But besides needing more funding, I do think that figuring out how to come out on the other side of the pandemic stronger than before. I do think there is an opportunity. And I think that in 10 years, we'll be reading articles in the Chronicle about how this institution positioned itself to be stronger, and enrollment has grown and it's in a better financial position. So I think the institutions that come out with a better business model, whether that's leveraging virtual more, whether it's partnering more with other local organizations, whether it's the healthcare industry, whether it's industry in general, to provide mental health supports and the like. I do think that helping to develop new models for financial aid, scholarship provision, and whatever the case might be to help students get to and through college, maybe coming up with new hybrid models for instruction where maybe every institution can't house all their students on campus, for instance. Maybe the new model is more of a hybrid model where you have some students having some time on campus with virtual learning. And so maybe I think the institutions that develop the best approach to navigating the pandemic are going to be the ones that come out stronger on the other side. And that's the biggest challenge. Now, there's so much unknown. We don't know what next year will hold. I think typically in the past, no one knew what a year from now would hold. But I think there was a pretty solid cadence that we would expect. Okay, we know next spring school will start this way, and we'll be following this typical normal cadence. Well, that's not the case. We know that yes, there will be some certainties, but there's a lot of uncertainty around those basic certainties, and so I think navigating those uncertainties are the biggest challenge. That's the biggest challenge for our institutions right now, and how to make themselves stronger in a uncertain world.
Can I jump in with a question?
Absolutely.
Hello, Dr. Bridges. Thank you so much for your talk. It was truly inspiring and definitely challenging. I have a question for you as it relates to what you discussed with regard to the state being intentional about addressing equity issues. So from a practical perspective, I just wanted to know, what does that look like? Are individuals assigned to each school where you're helping and working with schools to get to where they need to be in terms of addressing equity issues, or what do you do? So from a practical perspective, my question is, how do you actually work with schools to get us where we need to be? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. That's a great question. I think that so our state plan, where opportunity meets innovation, and Dr. Henderson participated in helping, and others on your campus, I'm sure, in helping to build out that plan, was launched a little over a year ago, almost 2 years ago now. And there are several working groups structured to basically build out the plan. One of the working groups, for instance, is a safe and inclusive learning environments. And so those working groups met over the previous year. Now, I will acknowledge that some of the working groups were stalled because of the COVID pandemic. That kind of disrupted everything, and people refocused their attention toward that. But we've got working groups designed to advance the efforts of the plan to make sure that we're incorporating equity throughout every element of our work, and from every element. I would encourage you to go to our website where the state plan is posted, and you can. I've got a copy of it somewhere here in my office, but the state plan is a great blueprint for how higher education should advance its work over the next several years and make New Jersey higher education stronger.
Thank you.
I think Nicole just posted that in the chat section. So for folks who are looking for it, it's in the chat section.
And,
Thank you, Nicole.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Nicole is my director of communication, a great resource and assistance to me. Thank you. There's a comment really in by Carrie Marks that is a great comment that I want to. Is Kari a student? I'm assuming so.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Oh yes, she or he said yes, sir. Okay. So she posted, or he, I don't know if Kari is a he or she, posted, okay. He would have, this is my answer to what Dr. King would do today. He would have stood up, stared for a silent moment at the audience, and stated an invitation to join him in standing for what is truly just in all the ways that each individual can stand each and every day in life. He would implore us all to be the change, just as he implored his audiences during his life. And he would have encouraged us to bring our changes to all of the arenas in which we operate today: social media, work, home, and daily life. And I do think that is a very accurate portrayal of what Dr. King would be about. He would look at what's going on today. I think he would have been appalled at what happened last week at the Capitol, but I believe he would have been out there the next day, or at least pulling his lieutenants together, trying to figure out what would be their response. Because while some of the attack last week was in theory about the election, there were underpinning elements behind that attack that really speak to, and I'm sure Dr. Donaldson could chime in here. We could probably talk about this for hours, but there were elements of that attack that got at the core of the equity fight, what was undergirding and underpinning the Black Lives Matter movement, and a call for equality and equity in this country. And I'm sure that Dr. King would have a group out there protesting and in silent and honorable but powerful opposition in short order after what happened last week as well.
Absolutely. And I think that touches on something that we kind of sort of forget in this moment of honoring Dr. King. We remember the nonviolent, but we forget the direct action, right? That is always a part of that. And that actually emerged from students sort of pressuring the sort of grown-ups in the movement to do more, right? So that student component, again, is really important. And engagement with students and in conversations with students, right, also pushes us towards the change that we want to enact. So yes, absolutely. There's a question that's actually in the chat, and this is from Sandra Lagai. With the potential crisis of academic leaders, in parentheses, baby boomers retiring at a high rate, particularly leaders in the president's seat, how can higher ed institutions prepare to maintain and secure an equitable environment?
Great question. I think that, the demographics of this country is changing. We know that in another 20 to 25 years or so, the estimates shift. But by 2045, more than half the people in this country will be what some would call people of color, minority, BIPOC, whatever you want to call it. And so how does that shift? How does our country prepare today for that eventuality in the next 20 years or so? And I do think that we have to hold our institutions accountable. We have to help to make sure that the leadership in higher education at our colleges and universities is reflective of the student body and the administrative and the faculty and staff who will populate those institutions. And so I think institutions have to be more intentional. There are programs. I know, for instance, the American Council on Education launched a program years ago, because I was part of the launch of that program, called the Spectrum Initiative, to try to make sure that there was a continuous pipeline of diverse candidates into the presidency, and not just presidency, but senior leadership in higher education. ASCU, the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, has the Millennium Leadership Initiative, which is designed to do the same. There was, I remember the Institute for Higher Education Policy used to have an initiative that was only funded for a few years, and there have been one or two others. But we need more of those programs. We need more of those programs to make sure that the pipeline continues to remain diverse. I mean, I think that one of the things that we're seeing is that the number of, even though we know that the pipeline of students, I believe that over half the students below the age of five, more than half of the population below the age of 5 are of color. However, when you look at the population, faculty and leadership in higher education, that is not the case. That is not reflective of the burgeoning wave of students that are going to be coming to our campuses in the next 13 to 15 years. And so as a result, we need to make sure that we continue to cultivate those programs to assure diverse leadership. But also each campus can create their own pipeline programs. I've known campuses where there have been pipeline programs to make sure that the younger administrators and faculty and staff have mentors and have development opportunities that they're able to move up to gain greater responsibility, so that they understand what it's like to become a department chair, to become an assistant dean, a dean, and to end up moving up the pipeline to leadership positions on their campuses. So I think that we have to be intentional on our campuses, as well as continue to hold the larger national pipeline of or hold a larger national body of associations and advocacy groups accountable to make sure that we continue to do the work that we've done in the past to ensure a diverse pipeline of leaders.
Okay.
So John had nearly 2/3 of our doctoral, John Melendez, nearly 2/3 of our doctoral students are people of color. Is that are you saying that's at NJCU or, okay, really so there you go. So NJCU already has a doctoral program in community college leadership. That's right, I remember Dr. Anderson telling me about that. And so just think about how that program could potentially be a pipeline for community college leaders throughout New Jersey for the next 20, 30 years. And so you've got the pipeline there, and how do you help to get those students into, when they graduate, into opportunities to move up into the community college sector here in the state?
So actually, I have a question about the your role. Your job is a big job, and I'm wondering how you see or understand the relationship between the various sort of tiers or institutions that exist in the state of New Jersey, how you understand that relationship between state regional, community colleges, larger public institution. How do you see them, and how do you see them sort of in the context of each other?
Yes, great question. I do think that, there are different models out there across the country for how states approach their higher education enterprise. The California has what is arguably the model that was created back in the 60s by Clark Kerr, the president at the time, where you've got the community college system, you've got your comprehensives in the Cal State system, then you've got your larger research universities in the University of California system, your UCLA's, UC Berkeley's, and the like. And New Jersey has been a little more organic in that the system, we don't have a true system in that sense. So California is kind of a host unto its own, and New Jersey is quite a bit different. However, I do think that we are building a higher education ecosystem where the community colleges can feed into, particularly when we've got programs like just approved in legislation, the Community College Opportunity Grant. The community colleges can feed into the state comprehensive universities or into the research universities as well. And that each set of institutions play a distinct role within the higher education ecosystem. Is there more work to be done to create more articulation and a stronger working relationship between those institutions? Of course, yes, there is. But I do think that we've got a great foundation in the state to build upon. The fact that over 500,000 students pursue higher education in New Jersey each year. We're a small state, but the fact that over 500,000 students pursue post-secondary education each year is amazing to be in a state this size with not as many public institutions as you might think that it could have, given that number of students. So I do think, as I'm learning in my first couple of weeks first couple of months, here in New Jersey, I'm still assessing how these institutions kind of connect together in a puzzle to create a well-defined and smooth higher education ecosystem. But I think there's a lot of work to be done. And with partners like Dr. Henderson and her colleagues across the state, I think that we will continue to build a scaffold where each institution fits neatly within the system that contributes significantly in their own and distinct way.
Thank you. We have a question from Larry Ledoux. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He says, how can we ensure that the Biden administration does not forgive and forget abuses against people of color and immigrants under the Trump administration in order to, quote, put the past behind us and move forward? How do we ensure justice for the victims? And I guess we could also think about that in terms of what has been done in terms of education and higher ed in particular, and the sort of reversals that we see occur under the Trump administration. So in addition to the issue of immigration and other kinds of violence, how do we ensure justice?
Sure, and I think that gets back to what the student Kari posted, that as Dr. King would say, we've got to all get on the front lines. We have to, as I mentioned in my remarks, we have to hold, less commence in getting to work to hold our institutions accountable. I think that given platforms like social media today, as we've seen it be used for ill will, social media can also be used in a very powerful way to amplify voices that have previously been suppressed. And I think we have to use every tool in our arsenal to make our voices heard and hold the Biden administration to the same level of accountability that we expected of any other administration in the past. And so we have to make sure that we're making it heard through our state legislators, but also directly to the administration, to that the work of the last 4 years that have been done to roll back advances related to racial and ethnic equity or equity related to difference and diversity. We have to do whatever we can to make sure that we hold the Biden administration accountable to roll those things back, because our country is stronger as a result of those kinds of advancements. So I saw there was a comment also in the Q&A section kind of related to that, about what are some things that students can do to combat systemic racism when we're witnessing it. And I think that, I want to be mindful of people's time. We have to use our voices. We have to make our voices heard. It's kind of, you would take, Dr. King had a quote about something about people who are silent are just as guilty as those who perpetrate wrong. And that's a gross paraphrase. But one of the worst things we can do is be silent. And when we see and witness oppression, when we see wrongdoing in action, one of the worst things we can do is to be silent. And so we can't be silent. It's kind of the same kind of vigilance that we expect of folks related to terrorism in airlines. We have to hold people we have to enact the same kind of behavior. If you see something, say something. If you see something, take action. Dr. King would want us all to take action and not sit silently by while our brother or sisters are being victimized.
Okay, we have a question from Tamara Cunningham. What role do international students play in issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in higher ed, and how they're often left out of the conversation? How can they be included in the conversation?
Great question. I often think about so I'm reading a book now called Caste. I recommend to everyone. I'm a reader, so I always have a book to recommend. So to you students, it's a easy read. Isabel Wilkerson, one of my favorite books. One of my favorite books is her other book, The Warmth of Other Suns, which documents the Great Migration North that I referenced early on. And in Caste, she uses an example from Dr. King early on about the caste system. Dr. King, I'm not sure if he was he might have already won the Nobel Prize, traveled to India, which he was very excited about because Gandhi, he took a lot of his teachings from Gandhi and the practice of nonviolence. He was excited about going to India. And And India has the classic caste system, and in it, the group called the untouchables are seen as the lowest level in the society. And he was at this event, and the person introduced him, called him an untouchable from America. And Dr. King was shocked. He was taken aback. And he realized, after thinking about it, he realized, you know what, I am an untouchable from America. And it reinforces how we categorize people in a number of different ways in our society. So I say that because I think it's an example from international context that shows that the things that are similar in other cultures, in other countries, resonate here in America, maybe in different ways, but I think that there are lessons from that international students can bring to bear from their own societies, whether it's India or a country in Africa or a country in South America, wherever it might be. There are examples and parallels from your country that you can bring to America that can inform your engagement in our fight for equity and justice, as much as the same fight has taken place around the world. So I think the international students have a place to play, have a role to play. I know that international students might feel as though they come here and they don't want to rock the boat too much because they don't want their visa rescinded, especially after what's happened over the last 4 years. However, I feel like we are all mutually bound, to use Dr. King's his words, we're mutually bound in this fabric of mutual agreement and mutual advancement. And so we have to understand that international students also can come here and join the fight and be part of our efforts to make sure that this country, and your country as well, is just as just and equitable as the words of our founding documents, which we knew were hypocritical at the time that they were written, but that all men are created equal. But I think the fight that we see taking place in our streets today, the fight that has taken place by Black folks since 1619, is a fight to make sure that our country holds up to those ideals.
We have, I think, time for just one more question. This is from Dr. Ellis Willis, who writes, given budget cuts during COVID, how do we ensure justice, intersectionality, racial justice, race intersectionality is not lost or watered down? Any recommendations for universities to prioritize these initiatives in the strategic plan?
Yes, that's a great question, because I've been there. I've been a chief diversity officer on a campus during the Great Recession of 12 years ago. And one of the things that people have a tendency to want to cut is racial and diversity work. And for me, every institution has resources. And it's all about, an institution shows its priorities and what it's serious about. I know that there are certain core things that every institution has to do, instruction and the like. But if you've got resources to continue to do the important work of diversity and equity and inclusion, if there are resources available and if those values are important to you, every institution should commit to them. I understand that choices have to be made, difficult choices have to be made. But I think that the fact that we're here having this conversation is an example of a commitment to this work. And to have your president here, who's been here the entire time. I've been on a campus where the president gave an opening remark at MLK and left. And so I think that those kinds of gestures are important. And I'm sure that the financial support has to be there as well. Now, we have to understand that we all, in times of austerity, we all have to take our share of cuts. But it feels as though that when this kind of work is important, that a place like NJCU, especially given your student body and your history, that I feel confident that despite the cuts, that this will continue to be a commitment of the university. Now, other institutions will have to battle with that and grapple with that. but that but that my recommendations are to once again hold people accountable for the commitments that the institution espouses.
There's another question. It's kind of a big question, but what do you see as the future of school funding, particularly for urban institutions, public urban institutions? It's an issue I'm actually really interested in. Just recently discovering that New Jersey property taxes are super high. So,
Yes, I've not even moved to New Jersey yet. I'm still down in Northern Virginia, but I am looking at places. And yes, the taxes in New Jersey are a bit, but you know, New Jersey also has been rated as having the best K through 12 system over the last couple of years, and is always in the top, has consistently been in the top 5 for years. So those quality schools come at a cost. And so this question about urban schools, does this mean, since I'm the Secretary for Higher Education, not K through 12 education, if this is a question about our K through 12 schools, I do think that, you know, the funding environment in New Jersey, I don't want to say too much, get myself in trouble, but the funding environment in New Jersey is a robust one given the taxes. And I'm not explicitly as familiar with the funding for the local school districts, but I do think that given the nature of how schools are funded, not only in New Jersey but across country with local taxes, which is why your taxes are so high, I do think that it bodes well for the K through 12 system in the state. Yeah, I don't want to say a whole lot more because I don't want to, because I'm speaking on something that is not in my wheelhouse. But I will say that, you know, the higher education environment is one that we're always looking to find innovative ways to bring more resources into the post-secondary arena, whether that's partnerships with industry and the like, and innovative and other innovations. We're looking to always build out a more robust avenue of support for our post-secondary institutions. Was that a murky enough answer for you?
very murky. Murky, clearly murky.
Okay.
But if there are no well, we're going to close the questions, but there are no additional. Well, I think there was a question earlier about ways in which professional staff can support students who are fighting injustice on campus without compromising their employment. I think.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Well, New Jersey is a union state, isn't it? So
right.
That's something to be mindful of. You know, it is difficult because I think that people have a tendency, and I used to say this when I was a chief diversity officer, that there's a fine line that you have to walk, that the university administrators, the president and the senior leadership, they hire chief diversity officers to really kind of help the university get to its equity goals from an administrative perspective. And some campuses, I'm sure, hire those folks to kind of quell any noise on campus. However, then the faculty, staff, and students on campus expect that person to be their advocate to the administration, to say, you need to let the administration know we're not satisfied and we're not going to take it anymore. So chief diversity officers, as well as other staff and others who support students in their fight for equity and justice, are in a difficult place because the university, from big U perspective, university expects the employees of the university to have a perspective. The students and faculty and staff expect them to have a different perspective. So it's a fine line to walk, and you have to be careful that I believe that you can support students in their fight for equity in a reasonable manner that holds the institutions accountable, but that doesn't take things overboard. I mean, I wouldn't encourage any faculty or staff to tell students, you need to go and have a sit-in in the president's office. You probably don't want to do that. But you can encourage students to say, let's work together with the administration to collectively come together and find the best solution that is best for everyone involved. And so I think that it does require a deft touch, but I think that you want to be mindful of, you don't want to disrupt the campus environment, because it's the environment where you exist as well, not only as an employee, but as a mentor, as a mentee, and as an employee. So I think that it requires, I think that if you're an employee, you could run up the ladder, hey, maybe not to Dr. Henderson, I know she's busy, but you could say the dean or to the provost or to the VPSA, there's some student unrest on campus that we need to be mindful of, we need to address. Let's come together and talk about how we can address these things. I think cooler heads often prevail. And I think supporting students in a way that is more measured and collaborative rather than combative. My favorite Dr. King quote is, we should all be able to agree, we should agree to disagree without being violently disagreeable. And we can disagree, or we can even agree that we don't share the same perspective, but let's be agreeable about how we come to a collective perspective.
Wonderful. Well, our time is up. Unfortunately, I think we could go on forever having a conversation with you. Thank you, Dr. Bridges, for opening up the lines of communication with us and for challenging us to also sort of rethink how we engage with each other in the digital space during this pandemic. So hopefully those sort of lessons will carry over as well. I want to thank everyone, first of all, those who participated in helping me bring this program to the community. Thanks to Dr. Bridges and his staff, to the members of BASO, in particular, Dominique and Benida, to Maria Lynn, and to Carissa Simon and Thyquel Howell for agreeing to be active participants in this program. And thank you all to the guests who signed up and showed up in asking questions. I really appreciate that you came today to be part of this program and to be in community with us. Thank you again. We're going to end our program, and thank you, Dr. Henderson, for, before I leave, thank you, Dr. Henderson, for your wonderful remarks regarding the state of things as they stand in the nation. And I think we've had a lot to take away from this program. And so hopefully we will put those things into action in conversation and collaboration with each other. Thank you again. I'm gonna end this with it's a pre-recorded conversation, performance by the Charles Mingus, NJCU's Charles Mingus Ensemble performing Duke Ellington's Sound of Love. This was recorded in the summer of 2020, and it's a concert that is dedicated to those we've lost in the COVID pandemic. So I'm gonna go ahead and lead us out. With that, again, thank you so much, and I appreciate you all being here. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you next year. And this officially concludes our program. Thank you all, and see you next year.